So remind me, who is Dr. Gary Sprouse?
Yeah, I'm the less stressed doc. It's like I wrote this book, Highway to Your Happy Place, a roadmap to less stress. And my goal has been to get everybody to be less stressed and living in their happy place and have that happy place in their pocket so they can take it out whenever they want to.
Regret is your brain telling you in the past you've done something wrong.
No, not wrong. No, it's not wrong. I'm stopping for a second. There's a difference. We're going to get to guilt. Guilt is you did something wrong. Regret is a choice came and it came out worse than you wanted to. So it's not wrong. It's just not as good as you would like.
So why can we not use that logical thinking for when we encounter that situation again and make a better choice that might play in our favor? Because it seems that people are also falling into regret because they keep making that mistake.
All our choices are about the future, but they get decided on in the past, right? So you make this choice and then you look back and go, oh, that didn't go very well. So we're always at risk for beating ourselves up because we're really trying to predict the future, which we are pretty good at, but we're not great at. We're not certainly 100%. So you're always on that. Oh, I don't know what's going to happen here. Second thing is that when we talk about regret, what I find is people will go back up the decision tree. So here's what happens. Like I use this as an example. So I go to the grocery store to buy a gallon of milk and I get into one line and then I see the line next door is going faster. So I move over to that line, but then that line slows down like, oh, I regretted making my choice. But then you go, wait. And then, but if you go to the grocery store and there's only one line, well, now you don't have a choice. So you can only go to that line, right? But then you can go back up the tree and go, why did I come to this store? It only has one line. I should have gone to the store down the street where I have two lines. Or you can go, wait, why did I even have to buy milk today? Wait, why did I even have kids? What the heck? What was the matter with me, right? So you can keep going back up the decision tree until you find one place where you go, see, I shouldn't have done that. So we find this whole tree where you can beat yourself up somewhere along the line.
Is there something like in our brain or something maybe clinically that is stopping us living in the present? Because even people that don't have regrets sometimes do struggle to live in the now as it is instead of reflecting on the past.
So regret is about making a decision. So it includes stopping, what your brain's telling you to do. So when you have a track that says, when I'm under stress, go smoke a cigarette. And then you go, no, I want to stop smoking cigarettes because it's bad for my health and my girlfriend doesn't like the smell of it or whatever, right? So the next time you feel stressed out, that track is getting triggered and your brain's going, okay, go get a cigarette. You're like, no, I'm not going to do that. We call that inhibition. Like I'm inhibiting that track. I'm not letting it happen, right? So humans can do that, which is incredible. It's how we get our choice. But it turns out we're not that great at it. So if I'm walking past a pack of cigarettes, I go, nope, not going to do it. Then I walk past a pack of cigarettes again. Nope, not going to do it. By the 10th time, I'm probably getting a pack of cigarettes, right? And it's like, because inhibiting is really freaking hard. And so then people go, oh, I can't believe I did that. Why did I choose to do that? But it's not really a choice because now your brain's been triggered up to do something. So you've actually had to stop it from doing it. And we can do it, but we're not that great at it. So 80% of people are going to end up back smoking the cigarettes. So the people of the 20% who aren't, they're like superheroes. You're like, wait, you're the abnormal one. I'm the normal one. So when we're regretting, it's really easy to regret because we're like, oh, why did I make that choice? But you have to realize that you're working against what your brain's telling you to do. And that's really hard to do.
How much of the process of regret is failing to accept responsibility for our decisions?
I think it's the opposite. It's like you're taking too much responsibility, right? You're going, oh, I made this choice and it didn't work out. Oh my God. And then you beat yourself up over it. And you're like, stop. You're trying to predict the future with this choice. You don't ever have all the information you need. So like, okay, say you're trying to decide whether I'm going to marry this girl or not. Well, you don't know what she's going to be like when she becomes a wife. You know what she's like as a girlfriend, but people change when they become a wife. You don't know what she's going to be like 10 years from now or 20 years from now. How crazy is it that we say to somebody, hey, I'm going to live with you for the rest of your life, no matter what? what? You have to be insane, right? So, and that's, love makes us a little bit insane. But you don't know all this piece of information, but yet you're still having to make a decision. And so it's difficult. Second off, your brain's telling you to do some things and you're going, no, I'm not going to do that. Third is like when as the environment might change. So it's like you might be saying, okay, we're going to live here. And then there's an earthquake. So now you have to live somewhere else, but it's in change, right? So there's all these moving pieces as you're trying to predict what's going to happen and then make a good choice. And so when you look backwards and you go, oh, maybe that wasn't the best choice, and then I'm going to beat myself up. No, stop. You didn't have all the information you needed. You're trying to predict the future. Things change as you go along. So don't beat yourself up so much.
The way we are describing it, it's seeming like a very simple concept. And to be fair, when you put any kind of emotion or problem into words, it does sound simple on paper. But I know there's going to be people listening to this, because I've been one before, that they do really get bogged down with the feelings of regret, and it's hard to move on when that's trailing behind you. So the actual process of accepting the decisions and learning from them and things like that, and the eventual process of getting over regrets, how complex is it? Are we maybe making it more difficult than it needs to be, or is it actually that hard?
No, I think we make it more difficult than we need to. Like we beat ourselves up over stuff. Like when you realize that you're making it, okay, I'm going to use myself as an example. So I had an office manager who said, your computer system's old and we need a new one. And you're like, okay, but that's going to cost 20 grand. And she's like, I know, but it'll be worth it. It'll be good stuff. I go, but you're the only one that knows how to use this. Nobody else in the office knows how to use this. And she's like, yeah, no, but I'm here. I'm here for you. I like working here. It's close to home, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. So I signed a contract to buy the computer. Before the computer even gets here, she goes, well, I found a job that's paying me $20 an hour more than you are, so I'm leaving. And I'm like, wait, what? What do you mean? Like, you said you were going to be here. She goes, I know, but right. So now I could look at my decision to buy this computer and regret that I made this decision. But when I made the decision was a good decision. The office manager was right. It was a better computer. She promised me that she was going to be here. Given that information, I made this choice. Now, the information changed. So now the choice doesn't look as good, but I can't beat myself up with regret, because if I go back and go, okay, given the information I had, that was the right decision to make. As time changed, then the decision didn't come out so good. But now I'm going to use my regret, that feeling of like, that didn't work out right. So the next time this comes up, the next time I have to buy a big piece of equipment, I'm going to get my office manager to sign her name in blood that says I'm going to be here. No, not really, but you get my point. Now, so the next time I buy some equipment, I'm going to have a different process to try and avoid that situation. So there'll be a computer that everybody knows how to use, or that'll be part of the training or whatever. So regret is telling you, okay, things didn't go right. Look at the information you had when you made the decision. If it was a good decision then it's a good decision. You don't need to regret that. What you can do with the regret then is change how you look at it in the future.
I'm so glad you referenced that story, because it actually links great to something that I experienced. I used to experience this quite heavily. So I used to hold regret at such a high standing that I would use those feelings to make my decisions in the future, not to make better decisions, but to make sure I didn't regret the decision I was making in the future. So if I had an opportunity for a new job, and say in the past I took a job that I hated and I couldn't get out of, and people told me not to do it and I didn't listen, the next time I was going to look for a job, I would constantly look for the safest option, because I wanted to nullify regret completely. Do you think that there is a difference between using the lessons from regret to make better decisions and using the lessons of regret to make safer decisions?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, I think you're spot on when you say that. I mean, a lot of people get afraid of making a bad decision, so they just don't make a decision. Yeah, absolutely. They take the safe road, and unfortunately, a lot of times the safe road actually turns out to be the worst road. So it's like, yeah, no, a lot of people are out there playing it safe because nobody wants to make a mistake. Nobody wants to have a bad outcome, but these things happen. And instead of beating yourself up over it, or as you say, restricting what you do so you don't end up in that situation where you have to make a choice. Yeah, if you can learn from these situations. The other thing that I talk about is who gets to weigh in on deciding whether it's a good or bad decision, right? That matters. So in my office, by using my example, my office staff was really mad at me. Like, you made a bad decision. You brought this computer and nobody knows how to use it. And now we're stuck with this stupid thing and we have to figure it out. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't get to weigh in, right? Because this isn't, it's not the decision I made was based on this office manager being here. So she changed the circumstances. So you don't get to tell me that it was a bad decision. So, no, I'm not listening to you on this one, right? Now, maybe with your mom telling you what business you should be in and you regret, you're like, oh, I should have changed. I should have done what my mom said. Well, maybe that's the case. And here's what I found. It turns out that most people have 7 or 8 jobs in their lifetime. And when you go to a new job, it only takes 2 years before you're as good as 90% of people in that field. So people have this fear of changing because they're like, oh, I'm going to be behind and I'm never going to catch up. Yeah, no, it turns out that's not reality. So if you've decided, hey, I picked a job that I didn't really like, go find a new one because it's only going to take a couple years and you're going to be back up where everybody else is anyway.
Funny enough, I actually think that concept might be the reason why people are falling so deep to regrets, because I use like the boxing analogy. Everybody thinks when a boxer has a 1 loss on their record, they're done. That's their career over because they've lost that 0. They're not undefeated anymore. They're not perfect. And that's somehow like in our brains that a bad decision means that we haven't lived a perfect life, and that's a bad thing. People are going to shame us. And like you said, a lot of jobs, you're completely right. It only really takes 2 years before you're better than most people. And in those 2 years, you might only do 3 or 4 things right before you start to get everything right. But do you think then, if we altered that perspective of perfectionism, this might help us deal with these emotions a little bit better? Because that does seem to be where it's stemming from too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, nobody wants to make a mistake and we all want to be perfect, but as you know, none of us are. And so, yeah, there's a thing called growth mindset versus fixed mindset. So in a fixed mindset, you say, I should know how to do this from the beginning. And you're like, no, you have to have a growth mindset where you go, there's gonna be some down to this learning. Like there's gonna be some mistakes, there's gonna be things that didn't go well, but I'm gonna keep learning and keep practicing and I'm gonna get better and better and better and better. And when you think of it that way, then you're not risking being a failure. You're just going, hey, I got to learn a new skill. It's going to take some time. There's going to be some setbacks, but I'm going to keep applying myself and I'm going to get better. And, within 2 years, I'm going to be as good as most people in this field.
Before we recorded, you mentioned that I made you look up the spotlight effect, and I need to know now that you've got fresh eyes on it, because I'm someone that's learned about it for a long time. Do you think we need to start teaching people this from an early age? Because I think it will probably bulldoze down a lot of problems people keep coming back to.
Yeah. Well, so when you said that, to me, what came up was like, I'm thinking of my granddaughter who's, was the first grandchild and everybody's taking her picture and everybody's like, oh, you're so cute. I think that's okay. That's the spotlight effect. That would make, so they grow up thinking, and now that we only have 1 or 2 kids in the family, when there's 10 kids, you don't get a spotlight. When there's 1 or 2 kids, then there's a spotlight, right? So you grow up in the spotlight that you think people do pay attention to you, right? So when you get to be an adult, you go, whoa, is everybody paying attention to me? Because they used to, right? So yes, I do think the spotlight effect is an interesting one because we live with ourselves, so we know what we're thinking, and we know like, hey, like this sweater didn't look so good, but I wore it anyway, and so you're thinking it's not looking good. So then you become hypersensitive to other people, and you think they're paying attention to you and that they care. And what we find is that that most people don't really care that much about what other people are doing.
I completely agree. And that is something that is actually the next part that I want to talk about with regret, because when I was doing this research to see what people were asking advice on the most in the realm of regret, the most common author of the question reply to someone giving them advice included, people will judge me. And that's something that now I'm thinking more and more on. Why are we so like scared of dealing with the regrets or opening up about them, telling someone else, oh, I have this regret about something, because we somehow still believe public shaming is this massive thing.
Well, it is a massive thing. So when we lived in bands of 50, hunter-gatherers, right? Shaming and ostracizing someone was the worst punishment you could have. And a lot of times it meant death, because if you weren't a part of the group, how the heck were you going to feed yourself or protect yourself from a lion, or how are you going to find berries or go, you couldn't kill a woolly mammoth by yourself. So shaming was a big deal. And what we use, and so that gets us into regret, but let's stick with, that gets us into guilt, but let's stick with regret. So we are a social organism. And we're a hierarchical organism, right? We start putting people, above us or below us or whatever. We measure ourselves against everybody. That's innate. That's the way we were designed as human beings. So we tend to be hierarchical and we tend to be group oriented. So when you're in a group, you want the group to like you. And so if you do something wrong or you do something that you think didn't go very well, yeah, the opinions of others make a big difference. And that's from prehistoric times. So it's just now different because in prehistoric times, there's only 50 people in your group that could tell you something didn't go right. Now we have 50 million people because you got computers and internet. So it just is a bigger audience now.
Yeah, I agree. And I can see that we're covering all these topics, we're getting closer to guilt. But before we do go in there, I want to see if there is something in your mind or something maybe you've tried with other people. Is there kind of a ladder format that people can apply now to their lives that will help soften those feelings of regret in the shorter term, and then over time maybe help them deal with it a little bit better?
So number one, it's a decision. So you've made a choice, which is, first off, go, what? I can make choices? Yay, good for me, right? We have that freedom, right? That we have the ability to make choices. Two is that it's something that's happened in the past. So you can't change what happened. What you can change is what's going to happen in the future. And so your power comes from not changing what happened, but changing what's going to happen. Three is that when you're making a decision, you're really making a decision about the future, which is never 100%. Four is that you never have all the information that you need to make the decision. There's always pieces of information that you never have that might have affected how you made the decision. And then five is that you have to use, instead of hiding from decisions and restricting your life because you don't want to make a bad decision. No, it's okay. You're not a failure if a mistake happens. It's just a setback, and you can learn from that and then be better in the future.
So now we'll move on to probably the harsher one out of the two, in my opinion, because this is the one that seems to be really eating people, and this eats people lifelong too. But first, can we start by asking, is guilt a normal emotion?
Guilt is a normal emotion. It was an emotion that's designed for society to shape our behavior. So it's the stick that we use when people aren't acting right. So we don't like people who don't feel guilt. Like if someone goes, yeah, I killed my mom, big deal, who cares? No, we don't like that. That is not good. You should be feeling guilty. So it's the stick we use to control the behavior of people around them.
There's a lot of people that are almost stockpiling guilt. Like they will have the constant reminder in their head of, I lied about this and it led to this and I shouldn't have done that. Or I bullied that person in school and now I feel so bad because now I look at them and stuff like that. But how much of guilt is not dealing with the outcomes that our decisions impacted?
A lot of similarities between guilt and regret, and a lot of people use them interchangeably, which they're not. So regret is I made a bad choice. Guilt is I did something wrong. Very different process, right? So I broke a rule, I did something wrong, and so the shame comes from, hey, that's the emotion we want people to feel so they don't do it again. That's the whole point of it. So when you feel guilt, it should be you did something wrong. You should feel bad. You should feel shame and then vow not to do that again. That's the key, right? So with guilt, again, it's something that's happened in the past. And now you can't change what happened. All you can change is how you act in the future. So if you stole a candy bar from the store and you feel bad about it, you should feel bad about it. But then that should spur you to never go do that again. And as long as you don't do that again, then guilt did what it was supposed to do, which is make you not do that again. And what I was just writing this morning, like as kids, we don't know what's right and wrong. We just do stuff, right? And our parents' job then is to say, no, 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 well, that's wrong. And then your job is to internalize it. So it's in your head. So that now when you go to the store, you don't need your mom to say, no, don't steal the candy. You already know that because it's in your head. But here's the key to guilt is who gets to decide what's right and wrong, right? So what I came up with is this idea, like humans are the only one have right and wrong. My dog, again, does not have right and wrong. So if she pees on the floor, she's like on whatever, I had to pee. So like, there's no guilt for her until I go, wait, not get in her face and go, and she might have a shame reaction, but that's not going to stop her the next time she wants to pee on the floor, right? Whatever. So deciding right and wrong is actually a really important thing. So it turns out that right and wrong fluctuate all the time. So it used to be wrong to, wear white after Labor Day or whatever it was, right? We look at our fashion. I play basketball with some friends, and there's some young kids that come, and they come in and they're in flip-flops and mismatched socks and leggings. And I'm like, are you kidding me? What? That is so wrong, right? But I come in with my headband and my wristbands and my tight shorts, and they're like, oh my God, you're so wrong, right? So that definition of right and wrong changes depending on who you're with. So when you look at it, here's the criteria. You have to define right and wrong, you have to figure out what group you're in. So if you're a Democrat, what's right, if you're a Republican, what's right, might be totally different things depending on the group you're in. 2, you have to have a set of rules. The rules can be written down, like in football, like the rules are all written down. And like if you break a rule, you get a red card or a yellow card. But the rules might not be written down. They might just be verbal rules. They might just be things that you think about. 3rd is there has to be a goal for the group. So I use if as a doctor, if I go to a medical community, right, and I don't like what they're saying, and I go and shoot the place up with a gun, that would be considered wrong, right? But if I'm on the Marines SEAL team, special ops, and I go in a place and shoot everybody up, I get a medal because they go, oh, really good job, thank you, right? So we did the same thing, but the groups were different, the goals were different, right? The rules of engagement were different. So all those make a difference in terms of what's right and wrong. But then the 4th piece is sometimes there's a gray zone. Like we're not sure. I don't know, was that right? Was that wrong? Not quite sure. And that's when we decide we need a judge. And so we give the judge the power to say, hey, I think it was right. That guy thinks it was wrong. You get to decide. And we give the judge a lot of power. And the ultimate judge is God, right? So there's a lot of times where we don't even buy into the Supreme Court or whatever, the judge that's saying something. And we go up to God and say, hey, you're the judge. What do you think, right? So before you can decide whether you're right or wrong, you have to define those 4 things. Then you can guard saying, oh, okay, yep, nope, that was wrong. Should have done that.
So I'm reflecting a little bit on like times where I've had feelings of like guilt or strong guilt, and I like the way you keep saying that it's kind of like in comparison to regret. This is your brain telling you did something wrong. This isn't like no, a decision didn't go your way. This is an actual, also almost like a statement. But I remember whenever I was like struggling with guilt at times, it wasn't that my brain was telling me that I did something wrong. It was almost like those indicators were making me feel like I violated who I am. Like almost like the decision I made that was, my brain was triggering me, telling me it was wrong. It almost made me feel like that isn't me. Like I shouldn't have done that because that isn't who I am. It's almost like it collides with your identity. How much does that play? And maybe people are taking it not on face value, but are maybe letting it cut them a little bit too deep.
Well, let me see if this answers your question. So I did seminars to help people with their stresses. And there's usually a mix of men and women. And so part of the seminar would be, okay, do me a favor, write down something you feel guilty about. And women were writing furiously. Guys were looking at the ceiling going, yeah, right? There was this incredible difference between the sexes, right? So then the women would come to me, and every single woman would always say, I feel guilty that I didn't spend more time with my kids as they were growing up. And so I said to them, that's not really guilt. That's a regret. You made a choice. You had to work to make some money so that you could provide food for your kids and clothing. So what you regret is the balance that you made between working and being with your kids. And they go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But then one lady came back to me. She goes, no, Dr. Sprouse, you don't have it right. There is definitely regret that the work-life balance wasn't where we wanted it to be. But there is an element of guilt because women are taught from early on that they're supposed to be there to take care of their kids. So when they're not, that's the unwritten rule that they're supposed to take care of the kids. So when they're not, they're breaking a rule and they do feel guilt. So you can feel regret and guilt at the same time. And in that case, the obvious was that they were regretting the balance, but the more subtle was they were breaking the societal rule of women are supposed to take care of their kids and they weren't. And so they did feel guilty about that. And there was a certain amount of shame that went along with that. And I don't know if that answers your question, but that's one of the things that I found was that sometimes the guilt can be more subtle that you don't even realize where it's coming from. Because who made up that rule that, moms are supposed to take care of their kids and dads aren't?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it does answer it in pretty much the exact way I was hoping you would. But there was one thing that I noticed that was actually kind of terrifying me a little bit on my research around guilt. I can see patterns where people are almost pushing down or normalizing the feelings of guilt the same way they would with sadness, to the point where it stockpiles them to like severe depression. What what way would the future look if that's something that somebody does, pushes it down to the bottom and doesn't deal with it?
Well, what I find is that sometimes people overuse the stick, right? So guilt is a stick, right? So shame is a stick. It's like, don't do that, and I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to give you pain so you don't do that ever again. But sometimes people overuse it, particularly on themselves. So I think you're saying this is like they beat the crap out of themselves for doing something. And so what I see in my office is people have a mismatch between what they did and how much punishment they're giving themselves. So one of my jobs is to say, hey, that was a minor infraction. You should not be beating yourself up that much for it. And the real critical piece is that, hey, you did something in the past that was wrong, but you haven't done it again since. So stop beating yourself up. Guilt did what it was supposed to do. It made you change your behavior. That is the goal of guilt, is to make you change your behavior. So if you change and you don't do it anymore, then stop beating yourself up. It did what it was supposed to do.
Yeah, it's like the guilt release paradox. It's like the more you try and deal head on with the guilt at the minute, it tightens its grip. It almost tries to suffocate you. But if you step back, learn the lesson, and proceed forward, knowing what that you got the feeling of guilt from those decisions and change them going forward, you actually release it without even knowing you even opened the door.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's at least one way to open the door.
What are some of the other ways? Because this is the other thing that I think I mentioned it to you the last time you were on. People are getting quite hesitant of the traditional practices to kind of overcome guilt because they do still feel like there's an element of judgment there and whatever. That's a topic for a different day. But is there something outside of the traditional practices, like more actionable steps that will help this process?
Two things. One is that society is actually, in general, if you make a change, society's pretty reasonable about letting you come back in, right? I mean, if you screw up, the people give you a second chance. And it's a pretty common thing to get a second chance. But here's what I find, and I'm going to use the word forgiveness. And so with guilt, when you did something wrong, really what you need to do is ask for forgiveness. But there's a process to that. Some people are willing to forgive. Excuse me. So there's a process to forgiveness, and some people are willing to go through it, and some people aren't. But when people are feeling guilty, they're beating themselves up, they have to learn to forgive themselves. That's actually the hardest person to forgive. Like, if you did something wrong to me, I can be mad at you, and all that's gonna do is make me feel bad and hijack my emotions. So if I forgive you, I actually feel better. But the process I have to go through is say, so I'm gonna use this example. It's kind of a unique situation. So this mother had like a 20-year-old son, and some guy came and killed her son. They had a fight and he killed her. And so the mother was distraught. She was really upset. This is, oh my God. And she was really angry at this guy. And the guy ended up in jail. And he felt bad that he killed the person, right? He regretted that. He felt guilty. He shouldn't have done that. So while he's in jail, there was all this court cases and stuff. And so the mom actually got to meet this guy. And what she learned about the guy who killed her son was that he was a wounded child. Like, he grew up in this crappy household. He didn't have a dad. His mom drank too much and did drugs. So he grew up in this ridiculously horrible place. And that was part of why this situation occurred. So she ended up forgiving him. She said, look, it's not that what you did is okay. I'm telling you, this isn't okay. Here's my story. I'm telling the story. I'm not keeping it a secret. And I'm going to name my hurt. You killed my son. That hurt a lot. I lost my son. That is not good, right? But I'm going to give you forgiveness, because me being mad at you and feeling like you're a victim, that doesn't do me any good at all. So I'm going to forgive you. But now I get to decide. The fourth step is, do I want to continue this relationship, or do I like, no, I don't want to ever see you again. I forgive you. I don't like what you did. Here's what you did. But you know what? I don't want to see you ever again. But what she did was, she goes, you know what? I can see that you're a hurting person, that you feel really guilty about what you did and that you're hurting, and you grew up in this crappy childhood. And she became, they bonded. And it turned out that he became the son that she had lost, and she became the mother that he didn't have. And so they renewed this relationship. And now it was on this incredible footing, this foundation of that they realized they'd been honest with each other and they'd forgiven each other. And it's like, so the relationship actually worked out really well. So forgiving becomes critical. It's something that we don't do enough of in this world, is we need to learn how to forgive. And this stuff comes from Desmond Tutu and his daughter, Mafu. And when South Africa switched from being apartheid to a more democratic situation, the blacks of that country didn't want to forgive. They were like, no, these people oppressed us. They killed us. They did all these bad things. We want them punished. And Desmond Tutu led a group that said, no, this isn't, we need to forgive. And so what they made the people do that had been the oppressors, they had to stand in front of a courtroom, in front of a whole group of people, tell the story, name the hurt, ask for forgiveness. And it's like, whoa, yeah, that was a very powerful political situation. And it went way better than when somebody just comes in and goes, yeah, we're just going to kill everybody or put everybody in jail. So forgiveness is critical to forgiving guilt. A lot of our religions are set up to do that, to help assuage our guilt. Like, we go, as Christians, we go, oh, Jesus died for our sins so that we don't have to feel guilty, as long as we don't do it again.
Yeah, I agree. And the forgiveness was something that I had noted down to talk about, but it's a weird one, because I wrote about, like, I've been journaling a lot of my thoughts lately, and this is one that regret and guilt came up recently, because regret is almost like a ghost of the version of you in the future that didn't screw up, and guilt is the same type of ghost, except it lives in your house. It lives next door. It's living beside you. It's got its feet up on your coffee table. It's eating everything out of your fridge. It's whispering in your ear at 2 a.m. that you could have done better in life if you had done this. But there's a twist that everybody misses. Every decision, every emotion you have is a ghost of a memory just waiting to be named. The problem is you let those memories haunt you and live in your house forever, when you could just, when in reality, if you just kicked them out and shut the door, you would forget about all these emotions so much quicker. And it's not even the fact of just forgetting them. You would then be able to deal with them better when the same situation comes up, which is what I keep seeing when I do this research. People are getting bogged down by these emotions because they're not realizing they're doing them over and over.
Well, let me tell you the story that I learned. There's a lady named Lisa Nichols who'd written a couple books, and she was giving a talk. And here's what she said. In her head was this line that says, "You're not a good person." And I think that's when people are feeling guilty, at least part of that is, I'm not a good person. And somewhere along the line, she realizes, you know what? That's not right. I am a good person. Despite the things that have happened, despite the things that I did, I am a good person. And I've done these things to make myself a good person. And she said, you know what? You've been driving the bus for a long time, telling me I'm not a good person. And I'm kicking you off the bus. I don't want you on this bus anymore. Get off, right? And then she stopped and she said, wait a second. She goes, because you were driving the bus, because I was feeling guilty, because I wasn't feeling like a good person, there are a number of things that I did that made me more successful. So you actually helped me in some ways. So here's the deal. I'm going to let you stay on the bus, but you don't get to drive it anymore. You're in the back. Because just as you said, like if I did something wrong and I kick off the guilt guy so it's not there anymore, well, I might go back and do that again because it's not there anymore. If the guy's in the back of the bus, he's going to remember, hey, you weren't supposed to do that, but he's not driving the bus. You see the difference? Yeah. So it's there because you want to remind yourself not to do that again, but they don't get to drive the bus and go, oh, your whole life has to change because of what you did in the past.
So there is something that I'm one of those people that I can't stop analyzing people. I pick up on things and doing this show and asking about human nature and stuff. I can't help but learn more about it and pick up on things when I'm going down day-to-day life. But there's one indicator I always notice when I meet somebody that is heavy dealing with guilt or regret, and it's how they word things. So they will say things like, instead of this happened to me, it'll be I did this wrong, or I don't like doing this. It'll always be like the slightest negative word thrown in there. And you mentioned about, you can be told you're doing something wrong, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a bad person for the rest of your life. Do you think that maybe our inner monologue, how we speak to ourselves and how we project our speech to others, plays a part in how we deal with these feelings?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, and you're right on. It's like, it's one of these foundational things that we have about ourselves that we don't really think about very much. It just is there. And so nobody even pays attention to it. So one of the things that I find is that when somebody's done something wrong, that they feel guilty about it, and they don't differentiate, I did a bad thing. They just make themselves a bad person. So what I talk about is in our brain is a prism. And that prism is filled up with our beliefs and our facts and our experiences. And all the information that comes in filters through that prism. So if in that prism is I'm a bad person, then when someone comes along and says, you're a bad person, you're like, oh, yeah, you're right. So your perception is, yeah, they found me out. Ugh, I don't like hearing that, but they're right. And then your emotions are sadness and guilt and regret and shame and blah, blah, blah. If somebody comes along, so now in your prism, it said, I'm a bad person. Somebody comes along and, dude, you are freaking awesome. I can't believe how good you are. And you're like, wait, that doesn't fit with what's in there. That doesn't make any sense. That guy must not know what he's talking about. He doesn't really know the real me. What is he really trying to get from me? Something else is going on. So you disregard the information. So now you get stuck with, you only hearing bad stuff because you're not even hearing the good stuff. So then that reinforces that you're a bad person because you're only hearing bad stuff. You literally cannot hear the good stuff. So then you continue to live your life with the shame and the guilt that goes along with the regret of things that you've done in your past because you're not willing or able to actually even see good stuff that's coming in.
There's this thing that I was writing about it in my newsletter, and I still don't really know what the term's going to be, but it's a kind of like a step-by-step easy way of dealing with these emotions. And I called it, to the guy that I was talking to specifically, I called it a behavioral laundry list. Kind of just almost like a chore list, like something that, like, parents are going away for the weekend, they leave you a set of chores, need to have all this done by the time I come back, the house needs to be clean, stuff like that. So is there a behavioral laundry list for dealing with regret and guilt? Maybe not big impact yet, but things like make amends, set boundaries, those type of things.
Yeah. So, right. So realize that guilt is something that happened. Guilt and regret are things that happened in the past. So really, their job was to change you in the future. So as long as you're changing, then they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Two is make sure that the regret and the guilt match up with what you did. Don't overdo it. Like, because people tend to overdo it. No, you don't need to do that. Three is realize that you're making choices or you're breaking rules. And it's like, you can learn to forgive yourself. You can change the system used to make your choices. Learning to forgive yourself. Because here's the problem. Like, that fourth step where you renew or release the relationship, like, I can do that with you. I can't do that myself. That step's not there. I don't have that step. I have to renew my relationship with me because I can't get away from me. So I have to go through the steps of like, hey, what did I do? Let me name the hurt. I'm not going to keep this a secret. When we were in Germany, it's an interesting process, right? We were talking to one of the guides, and Germany after World War II was feeling guilty. And they were hiding it. They didn't want people to know. My wife had gone there when she was in high school, and she was told that people in southern Germany do not know that there's a Berlin Wall because it was so shameful that they hid that fact, okay? But then in the 1980s, early 1990s, the country made a change, and they switched from keeping it a secret to telling everyone so it wouldn't happen again. And so they were going through the process of forgiving themselves as a country. So they told everybody, don't do that. That was bad. Here's what happened, and it was wrong. Don't ever do that again. And then they learned to forgive themselves. So now they don't like what happened, but they're more comfortable with the idea that it did happen. And they just want to make sure it doesn't happen again. So they went through the process of forgiveness as a country. And so if a country can do it, why can't I do it, right? And the key then is to go, okay, here's what I did. Here, I'm not going to tell people that I did this. I'm going to tell people, and I'm going to be forgiving. And then it's okay because I'm going to separate out. This isn't me as a bad person. This is just me did a bad thing. And I'm going to change and not do that again, that's what makes me a good person.
I don't think there's any more perfect way of ending the show with that one there. So where can people find you? What have you got out? What's coming in the future?
Yeah. So on my website, it's thelessstresseddoc.com. And then if they need more personal information, they can just email me at lessstresseddoc@gmail.com. And yeah, so I got books in my head that I got to sit down and write, but retirement's so busy. I don't know.